Hello. This is my Southern Art and Literature project. Before I get started, if you hear a lot of noise in the background, it is storming really bad right now, so you're probably just hearing all of that probably just hearing all of that lightning and thunder. And also, if you see me looking off to the side, I have my laptop here with all of my notes and the artwork so I can keep it fresh in my mind. Okay, so the first piece I chose is Southern Country Cookbook by Robert Selby. It's a watercolor on paper, and it is a 19 by 24-inch piece. So this piece depicts a brown cookbook in the right-hand corner that has the same title as the piece, so Southern Country Cookbook. It seems to be resting on a table of some sort, like some top of some type of cloth, and next to it is a brown sack bag that I can't really make out all the writing, but I assume it says apple, so I'm gonna assume it's an apple bag. And below that is some type of wooden platter or plate that has a whole white onion, a whole yellow onion, a loaf of bread, and possibly sourdough. I'm guessing by the way it appears. It can be any kind of bread, but I assume maybe a sourdough that's merely based on the way it's kind of scored on top, like the design it has, and a whole red bell pepper. And to the bottom left of that, there's a tiny salt shaker. Looks kind of. Actually, I don't really think that's a salt shaker. I'm not sure what that is. Like a little tiny. I don't want to say pot, but a little container. It looks ceramic, possibly. It has like a little stopper. I'm not sure what exactly that is. I thought it was a salt shaker, but now I'm not sure. Or it could be. I have no idea. And then the last thing is also a bunch of fresh herbs. It looks like cilantro to me, but it could honestly be anything. So this piece, in particular, the cookbook, it reminded me of Everyday Use by Alice Walker. The cookbook, I would assume, has near and dear Southern country recipes in it, and Everyday Use takes place in, I believe, rural Georgia. I don't think they ever name where exactly, but I get the feeling that it's definitely Georgia. It's definitely a rural country background. But the recipes in that book, obviously, they embody a certain lifestyle, that D slash Wangiro, hope I'm pronouncing that right, that she grew up in and is trying really hard to forget in order to forge this new identity for herself that she's found by going to school, which also kind of ties into the piece because it's about country living, and that is what she grew up in. And it wasn't until she went off into college in Augusta, which I assume, at least in this context of the story, is kind of more of a city urban lifestyle. And to go back to the storybook, the cookbook, the recipes in said cookbook, or even just the cookbook itself, could be something that's been passed on from generations to generations. It's something that is of tradition, that has a lot of family history, and that history is something that needs to be cherished and appreciated, and in a way that celebrates it, but also celebrated in a way that also kind of admires and honors that, and kind of like the way Maggie, Dee's sister, feels about with the quilt. She sees it as something, yeah, she appreciates it, but she also sees the value in it and what it, and she sees it for what it is. Yes, she appreciates it, but also she knows at the end of the day it's still a quilt, and she doesn't view it as something that needs to be tossed aside or looked down on or viewed as some kind of spectacle or exhibit in the way that Dee does. In general, with her history, her upbringing, but also particularly with the quilt. And I feel like that two ways of thinking are kind of cemented in the short story with the lines that Dee says she'll probably be backward enough in regard to her wanting the quilt and the quilt actually being promised to Maggie. Dee says she'll probably be backward enough to put them to everyday use And then the mother, which I don't remember if she has a name or she just goes by mom, said, I reckon she would. God knows I've been saving them for long enough with nobody using them. And I think that right there kind of, it definitely, it speaks to my other point about how there are two varied ways of thinking here, where Dee kind of just sees it as some kind of exhibit, some kind of toy, something that she likes the idea of it, but not really it. And while the mom and Maggie see it for what it is, yes, they, yes, it's something of their family that's been them for years, but also they, at the end of the day, they know it's just a quilt and it should be used as such, not something to be hanging on display. And to talk about like the other aspects of the paintings, not just the storybook, but just the ingredients that are there. There's just simple, basic ingredients, which I think also speaks to the simplicity of Southern country life, the life that we see that the mom and Maggie live, and the life that Dee came from, and she's trying to rebuke. So I think in general, the whole piece is just very reminiscent of that lifestyle, and it just reminded me a lot of everyday use. The next piece I chose is The Ohio River Valley Stream by Will Henry Stevens. It is a pastel on paper, and it is 10 by 14 inches. So this piece depicts a stream. So I guess kind of like a, I'm not exactly sure what the difference between a river and a stream is. I guess a stream is just smaller. Maybe it might be like a little, like, when a river kind of comes off. I'm not exactly sure, but something along those lines. It seems to be in the middle of the woods, the middle of nowhere. So of course it's surrounded by a lot of green trees. The water, from what it looks like, doesn't look that tall. It looks kind of like shallow, so this could probably be like the beginning part of it or just a certain aspect of it. It's pretty shallow, and the ground is, it looks kind of clay-like. Like, it definitely doesn't look dirt. It's not like dark brown. It's kind of like a light reddish brown, so I'm assuming it's maybe clay. But it's very like bumpy and hilly. There's like no flat at all. And the piece, while it has kind of bright, vibrant colors, it's kind of like muted in a way. Like, it's, I don't want to necessarily say dull, but kind of like that. It's kind of dull-like. And so this piece reminds me a lot of The River by Flannery O'Connor. In my mind, when I was reading the story, this is exactly what I imagined the river area where the baptism took place. So, it's somewhere kind of remote, at least in terms of the actual painting that I'm referring to. It's definitely somewhere kind of remote. Based on the terrain, you definitely can't get here by driving, so you can really only walk. It said shallow water, a little tougher. Like, that to me sounds perfect for what was described in the story. Granted, based on the actual description in the story, it's a little different. In the story, the area is described as having a bright orange stream. Orange, I assume maybe like really clay-like at the bottom that's making it orange. I would say like dirt, but I don't think it would make it orange, so I assume it's maybe clay-like. And there's hills of dark blue trees. The trees and dark blue trees, I do think it's pretty interesting. I can't really imagine what this looks like based off the actual description. I just think that what is depicted in the piece, to me, seems a bit more fitting, but in general, I do think it gives the vibe that was described. It's kind of warm and inviting, but still kind of mysterious, maybe even like a little scary. With, of course, some choices aside, color-wise, and maybe a little bit in terms of location, because I do believe in the story you could drive to where the river was. But a few things aside, I think it very much matches, or it could fit with what you would assume a healing or baptism would take place in a river. So yes, that's kind of where I think it fits with the story. And also kind of seems like a place that, you know, seems very secluded, so if you weren't really looking for it, you probably wouldn't find it, or, you know, something could happen, like the kid drowning himself, and no one would really know. So yes, that are my two pieces that I've chosen from the Odin Museum of Southern Art that coincide and compare with the short stories that we read from this unit. Thank you.